So at the end of the winter, when we were finally fairly sure that we weren't going to get any more snow, my mom and I got into the car to go somewhere, I forget where, and the song Closing Time by Semisonic was playing. As it played, that seminal line, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end," resonated for her, and she repeated it out loud, followed by the simple observation, "I really like that." Most of you know that I live with my mother. I have since I returned to Nebraska in 2016. She has multiple health issues that cause chronic pain and mobility issues, so in addition to me having a safe place to live and recover from my own debilitating mental illness, she was able to live a more independent and higher quality of life. I can do the dishes, do the laundry, do all the household chores, while she works and makes the money to pay for the household, though I do also receive disability benefits. We've become the millennial version of the romanticized traditional 1950s household. But we ended up here because of an ending. Specifically, the ending of my first attempt at going through seminary to become a UU minister, the ending of my marriage, and the ending of my own ability to live independently. These were all tangled up together, and I'm sure I'll talk about them more in depth another time, but suffice it to say that when this ending arrived, it bowled me over. If I'm remembering correctly, and I by no means guarantee that I am, my mother and my two sisters flew out to San Francisco Bay while I was hospitalized for suicidal ideation, and helped me and supported me as we tied up the loose ends and made arrangements so that I could come home to Nebraska, where my entire family is, and lay down by the still waters of their love so that I could heal. And while researching to write this piece, I discovered that the song Closing Time isn't just what it appears on the surface, a catchy song about last call at a bar that happens to have some surprisingly deep and poetic lines. It was written by Dan Wilson, lead singer of Semisonic, upon the birth of his first child. It turns out he also helped the Chicks write Not Ready to Make Nice, which is another incredibly important song to my mom and I, and again, I'm sure I'll talk about it more another time. But this song, Closing Time, is actually about the end of his life before fatherhood, which he enjoyed and will miss, but also the beginning of his life as a father, which he couldn't be more excited for. So it all comes back to that lesson. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. This is a lesson that my mom has taught me over and over again, and I'm sure will continue to teach me. It started when I was in pre-kindergarten, and we, as a family of Methodist clergy, had to move every 4 years. We moved from De Smet, South Dakota, and that period of my life ended, and it sucked. We were moving away from friends and my dad's mother, but we were also moving closer to my mom's parents. Then, after another move, she taught me about the ending of her marriage to my father. The relationship was extremely unhealthy, and it needed to end, but unfortunately, a large number of the membership of all 4 churches they were serving at that time decided they had a right to get involved, which made the divorce far more difficult and hurtful than it needed to be. But during that time of pain and loss, she said something that has stuck with me ever since. Sometimes the best way to honor a covenant is to end it. And she was right. Until that time, I'd never seen marriage, or even romance, as a bright source of joy. They were duties, routines, and necessities. After the divorce, with a lot of work, our home became a more peaceful and loving place. It took a few years and a lot more work, but it also led to a better relationship with my father. Even though he initially opposed the divorce, he now acknowledges that it was absolutely the best choice. And then we moved again, and we got to come down to Fremont, right at the edge of the Omaha metro area. It was the biggest town we had ever lived in. We were closer to my mom's family than we had ever been before, and we were in the best school district we'd ever been in. For my mom, she was part of the largest and most active church she'd ever preached at. Everything was looking great. But that was 2001. And while the membership loved her, the other pastors didn't so much. And after the 9/11 attacks and the nationwide crisis of faith that accompanied them, the Methodist cabinet decided that the best solution was to move her again. But after the divorce and the move just a year earlier, Mom decided that it wasn't fair to us kids to disrupt our lives that much again so fast. So rather than going to another big prestigious appointment, she asked to stay within the radius that would allow us to option into Fremont Public Schools, and we ended up in Valley and Waterloo. Shortly thereafter, the Valley congregation voted to sell their building and merge with the community church in town. The Waterloo church was excellent. We loved them. They loved us. They loved Mom as a pastor, but they weren't large enough to support Mom full time. So she decided on another ending in her career and agreed to go part-time rather than move again. She worked for a while as a Walmart cashier, but ultimately found a job in a call center, and from there she became a trainer for new hires. She had become a pastor because of her desire to live a life of service and integrity, and because of her love of teaching, especially teaching adults. And she found in this new position that she was teaching more than she ever got to as a pastor. Finally, after my graduation from high school, she and my sister Kylie moved back to Fremont, and she stopped being an appointed pastor at all. She retained her orders and was a member in good standing of the United Methodist Church, but she wasn't even serving part-time anymore. And it was several years before she taught me the next big lesson. I had met, fallen in love with, and moved in with Ryan, and he had asked me to marry him. She agreed to fly out to perform the ceremony, and when she returned to Nebraska, she and nearly a dozen other Methodist clergy were called into the bishop's office for a meeting where they were told that while there was some leeway for what they preached and taught about homosexuality, there was no leeway when it came to queer marriage. He suspected that some of them had performed queer weddings, but he didn't want confirmation, and they weren't allowed to perform anymore. Shortly thereafter, my mom gave up her orders, and that was the ending of her being a United Methodist pastor, and of being a United Methodist at all. She's UCC now. But that ending also allowed her the next beginning of living with true integrity and serving the best way she is capable. And with that lesson taught, I was able to understand and believe the next lesson about that major ending in my life. The divorce, the leaving California, and any chance of finishing my MDiv at Star King. The surrender of the pretense that I could live alone and take care of myself. These were lessons that were needed for the new beginning of healing so that I could even survive this illness. Now at this point, I've referenced the rock song, Closing Time, quite a few times, but I haven't even touched on the song I actually asked Reverend Mary to include in the service. The 23rd Psalm, arranged by Bobby McFerrin and performed by Cantus. Part of this is that it is a lot easier to fairly use a song that is already in our hymnal, Singing the Journey 1038, if you were wondering. But ultimately, it's because while Mr. Wilson's song so beautifully illustrates that most important lesson my mom taught me, Mr. McFerrin's song best describes my mother and our relationship. The song, and the original psalm, never promise that she will shield me from all harm and pain. She never promised me that everything would be perfect. But she did promise that she would always walk through that pain with me. She promised that she would teach me to live a life of service and integrity. She promised that she would anoint my wounds, bring me to a place of safety, and let me rest. And she has delivered on her promises.